Rain lashed against the grimy windowpane, the relentless downpour echoing the chaos that had taken over Sarah's life. Each drop seemed to hammer home the reality of her situation, a constant reminder of the storm she was caught in, mirroring the turmoil brewing inside Sarah. Her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more terrifying than the last. She felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of her fears and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Clutched in her trembling hand was a black envelope, its presence as foreboding as the storm outside. The envelope felt heavy, not just in her hand but in her heart, as if it carried the weight of her worst nightmares, its surface cold and ominous. The ornate wax seal seemed to mock her, a cruel reminder of the twisted game she was about to be drawn into. Fear, sharp and cold, pierced through the numbness that had settled over her since her sister's disappearance. It was a fear that gnawed at her insides, a constant, unrelenting presence that refused to let her rest. The words on the card inside were scrawled in elegant calligraphy, a stark contrast to the dread it invoked. The handwriting was beautiful, almost mesmerizing, but the message it conveyed was anything but. A stark contrast to the dread it invoked. Masked madness awaits, Sarah. The words seemed to leap off the card, wrapping around her like a vice, squeezing the breath from her lungs. Find her if you dare. The challenge was clear, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. This was no ordinary invitation. It was a summons to a nightmare. Sarah knew this was no ordinary invitation. It was a call to action, a demand that she step into the unknown, face her fears, and confront the darkness that had taken her sister. It was a one-way ticket to a nightmare, a journey into the heart of darkness where every step could be her last. The fog and shadows seemed to close in around her, whispering secrets and lies, making her doubt her every move. A twisted game whispered in hushed tones in the darkest corners of the city. The stories she had heard, the rumors that had circulated, all pointed to one thing. Masked madness was not just a game, it was a death sentence. They called it masked madness, a macabre spectacle where the masked and the masked preyed on the desperate and the foolish. The masks were not just disguises, they were symbols of the twisted souls that wore them, hiding their true intentions behind a facade of elegance and mystery. A macabre spectacle where the masked and the masked preyed on the desperate and the foolish. The room was filled with shadows, each one hiding a potential threat, each mask a reminder of the danger she was about to face. But Sarah had no choice. Her sister's life hung in the balance. Determination replaced fear as she steeled herself for what was to come. She would not let her sister become another victim of this twisted game. She would find her, no matter the cost. A black van, its windows tinted an impenetrable shade, delivered Sarah to a derelict warehouse on the city's outskirts. The vehicle's engine hummed ominously before falling silent, leaving her in the eerie stillness of the night. The warehouse loomed ahead, its decaying structure a stark contrast to the vibrant city she had left behind. The air was thick with an unsettling quiet, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. The air hung heavy with the stench of decay and fear. Overgrown weeds and rotting wood added to the sense of abandonment, as if the place had been forgotten by time itself. The fog swirled around her feet, making each step feel like a journey into the unknown. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to seep into her very bones, chilling her to the core. Two masked figures, their expressions obscured by grotesque porcelain visages, greeted her. Their presence was both surreal and terrifying, like something out of a nightmare. The masks, with their exaggerated features, seemed to mock her fear. She could feel their eyes on her, even though she couldn't see them. It was as if they were measuring her, assessing her worth. One wore the leering grin of a clown, the other the stoic countenance of a plague doctor. The clown's mask, with its garish colors and twisted smile, seemed to laugh at her predicament. The plague doctor, with its beak-like mask, was a grim reminder of death and disease. Together, they formed a grotesque duo, each representing a different kind of horror. Their silence was more unnerving than any greeting. It was as if they were waiting for her to make the first move, to show some sign of weakness. The stillness of the moment stretched on, amplifying her anxiety. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and insistent, in the oppressive quiet. Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of shadows and flickering lights. The dim, intermittent lighting cast eerie shapes on the walls, creating a sense of disorientation. The floor was littered with debris, making each step a cautious endeavor. The walls seemed to close in on her, the narrow corridors adding to the claustrophobic atmosphere. The air was thick with the smell of stale sweat and terror. It was a scent that clung to her, a constant reminder of the fear that permeated the place. She could feel the tension in the air, a palpable force that seemed to press down on her. Every breath was a struggle, every step a test of her resolve. Dozens of eyes, reflecting varying shades of fear and desperation, turned to Sarah as she entered. Each pair of eyes told a story of its own, a tale of survival and despair. The faces in the shadows were a haunting sight, their expressions a mix of hope and dread. It was clear that they were all in the same boat, each one fighting their own battle. They were the other players, their faces etched with a chilling mix of bravado and terror. Some looked determined, their eyes burning with a fierce resolve. Others seemed on the verge of breaking, their fear almost palpable. It was a stark reminder that this was no ordinary gathering. Each person was here for a reason, each one driven by their own demons. This was no game, it was a fight for survival. The stakes were higher than anyone could have imagined, and the cost of failure was unthinkable. Sarah knew that she had to be strong, that she had to find a way to navigate this nightmare. The warehouse was a place of terror, but it was also a place of opportunity. She just had to find the strength to seize it. The rules were simple, deadly, and absolute. They were designed to test the very limits of human endurance and sanity, pushing each participant to the brink of despair. Each player had to navigate a series of challenges, each more terrifying and complex than the last. The maze was a labyrinth of fear, with haunted rooms that seemed to come alive with every step. Their every move scrutinized by the masked figures who controlled the game. These figures, shrouded in mystery, watched with an unsettling intensity, their eyes never leaving the screens of the surveillance cameras. Failure meant a fate worse than death. The corridors echoed with the cries of those who had failed, their spirits seemingly trapped within the walls, a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. Win, and you earned your freedom, and perhaps a chance to rescue a loved one trapped within the game's cruel clutches. The promise of liberation was a beacon of hope in the otherwise dark and oppressive environment. Sarah's blood ran cold as the true nature of the game dawned on her. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks, the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. She was trapped in a nightmare, surrounded by predators both masked and unmasked. The line between friend and foe blurred, making trust a dangerous gamble. The desperation in the eyes of her fellow players mirrored her own. Each face told a story of fear, hope, and a burning desire to escape the clutches of this malevolent game. But within her, a fierce determination ignited. The fear that once paralyzed her now fueled her resolve, transforming her into a force to be reckoned with. She would survive, for herself and for her sister. The thought of her sister, trapped and helpless, gave her the strength to push forward, to face the horrors head-on, and to fight with every ounce of her being. The warehouse was a labyrinth of interconnected rooms, each more disturbing than the last. One room was a macabre nursery, filled with blood-stained toys and the lingering scent of milk and decay. Another was a makeshift operating theater, stained with years of unimaginable horrors. Each room presented a new challenge, a sadistic test of will and instinct. Sarah could hear the screams of other players echoing through the ventilation shafts, a chilling reminder of the stakes. Fear threatened to consume her, but she pressed on, her resolve hardened by the knowledge that her sister's life hung in the balance. The game masters, the masked figures who orchestrated this macabre spectacle, seemed to delight in the players' suffering. Their laughter, distorted by their masks, echoed through the corridors, a constant reminder of their omnipresent gaze. Sarah had witnessed horrors beyond comprehension. She had seen players broken, their sanity shattered by the game's relentless cruelty. She had seen blood spilled, lives extinguished, all for the amusement of the masked figures and those who found entertainment in such depravity. As the night wore on, the initial number of players dwindled. Some succumbed to the psychological torment, their minds fracturing under the relentless pressure. Others met a more gruesome end, their screams forever etched in the memories of those who witnessed their demise. Sarah had hardened herself to the carnage, her survival instinct overriding her revulsion. She had to win, even if it meant becoming a monster herself. Each challenge she overcame chipped away at her humanity, replacing it with a cold, steely resolve. Through cunning and a healthy dose of luck, Sarah found herself face to face with the final challenge. It was a room bathed in an eerie red light, a single spotlight illuminating a lone figure in the center. It was her sister, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. But standing between Sarah and her sister was the final obstacle, a towering figure in a blood-soaked bear mask. He wielded a rusty meat cleaver, its blade glinting menacingly in the dim light. This was the final test, a twisted game of cat and mouse where only one could survive. The game master, his voice a guttural growl from behind the bear mask, issued a final sadistic decree. Sarah had a choice: kill the bear, or her sister would die. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thick with the metallic scent of blood and the weight of impossible choices. Time seemed to stand still as Sarah weighed her options. There had to be another way. a way to save her sister without succumbing to the game's bloodlust. But as the seconds ticked by, she realized the terrifying truth. There was no escaping the game's cruel logic. Driven by a primal need to protect her sister, Sarah launched herself at the bear. The warehouse echoed with the clang of metal against metal, the air thick with the coppery tang of blood. She fought like a woman possessed, her every move fueled by desperation and love. Finally, with a guttural cry, Sarah plunged the cleaver into the bear's chest. The figure crumpled to the ground, the mask rolling away to reveal the face of a stranger, twisted in a grotesque parody of agony. Sarah rushed to her sister, her hands shaking as she ripped the tape from her mouth. But her relief was short-lived. As she looked into her sister's eyes, she saw not gratitude, but a chilling emptiness. Her sister's lips curled into a cruel smile and she whispered, "You should have let me die." The room plunged into darkness. Screams filled with pain and betrayal echoed through the warehouse, then silence. The game was over. Masked Madness is more than just a story. It's a glimpse into the abyss of human cruelty and the lengths we'll go to for survival. If you crave more stories that will chill you to the bone, follow our channel for a weekly dose of horror that will leave you breathless. Dare to enter the dark.